everyone. I think you may all know about us, but I am Danshu and this is Ning, and we both work on the research team of China's food system with Stephanie Scott. And today we will present our research findings recently from around the ecological modernization of agriculture in China. And the first two sections will be presented by me to contextualize our study on the empirical and theoretical perspectives, and also to characterize the diverse forms of ecological farms in Nanjing. And the followed two sections were presented by me to interpret the food policies in China and to understand the group of new farmers. And we will co-give the conclusion at the last. And so, internationally, the broad ecological movement has spanned the entire, spanning the entire 20th centuries, from the 1920s biodynamic farming in German, natural farming, organic certification, CSA, and agroecology to the sustainable intensification in 1990s in Africa. But through this whole period, China is actually exploring the opposite of chemical agriculture. Until late 1980, the ecological agriculture finally appeared in China. So the trajectories and ideologies of ecological agriculture in China may different from that in most of other countries, which makes China an interesting case to study. And although it starts very late, the ecological agriculture in China is actually gaining the significance recently in several perspectives. The first is that, as shown in this picture, in this table, there are three types of certified ecological agriculture types in China that were prevalent in 1990s and 2000s, let alone other uncertified types of ecological agriculture in China. And the second, we can see there is a growing trend of organic agriculture in China, although still occupy less than 1% of the market. And the other thing is that from the state's view, the authority thinks organic agriculture is an important way to realize the ecological modernization in China. Considering the significance of ecological agriculture and the research gap of enough qualitative research in exploring the diversities and future possibilities of ecological agriculture in China, our research will contribute to the gap by mapping out the structure and model types of ecological agriculture and evaluate those ecological agriculture using the framework of ecological modernization, and combining policy analysis and fieldwork interviews to unpack the structures. So our theoretical framework will be the ecological modernization. It includes two directions of strong forms and weak forms. Previous scholars use a lot of different terminologies to indicate the differences between the two terms. For example, the bio versus eco to indicate the different uses of technology, and the weak sustainability versus the strong sustainability to indicate the different view of natural resources, and the efficiency versus the biodiversity to indicate the different use of farming activities. If these terms haven't give you a sense of the differences between strong and weak, these two can be more specifically be differentiated through the four dimensions of ecological and economic, political, and social-cultural. On the ecological dimension, the weak ecological modernization indicates the technological method and the scientification. For For example, if the farm wants to resist pest, they may use the GMO to control the pest. But the strong ecological modernization actually embrace the agroecological methods and adaptive to ecologies and places. For example, they will raise chicken and ducks to ease the pest. And on the economic dimension, the weak forms wants to increase the productivity and adopt cooperative management. To generate the profit, the supermarket chain may be one of the marketing channels they use. And on the contrary, the strong ecological modernization concern on the sustainability and rely on the agro-food networks to realize value adding. For example, using the common CSA models or farmers market. And on the political level, the weak side indicates a top-down steering, like this structure varies. The power is centralized at the top level, while the strong ecological modernization will entail the participatory structure that wants to involve a lot of members in this community. And on the social cultural level, the weak ecological modernization means a loss of farmers' craftsmanship and agricultural employments. For example, they will use the large machines to replace the human labor, and on the strong side, it provides labor-intensive jobs and increase farmers' autonomy. Like they will remain farmers' skills in doing the farming works. And it is also noteworthy that was noting that the table here just listed the ideal types of the weak and strong ecological modernization. We actually prefer a spectrum that the weak ecological modernization and the strong ecological modernization are at the end of the spectrum, and we will use the spectrum to apply this spectrum on our research. Besides, the strong and the weak discussion suggests that ecological agriculture can achieve different versions of ecological modernization by taking different forms. So, as I said before, the Chinese government want to realize the ecological modernization through organic agriculture. But what's their view of ecological modernization? And on the ground, what versions of ecological modernization are really implemented by those ecological initiatives in China? So we will look at these research questions by locate our study in Nanjing, China. As you can see from the map, Nanjing is located at the southeast part of China, and the Yangtze River is nearby. So Nanjing is a very prosperous city with rich history and abundant agricultural resources. Besides, it is also the origin place of the OFDC, the very first organic certification institution in China. Our initial contact of ecological farms are shared by them actually. And we also turn to Nanjing Agricultural Council, the internet, and use the snowball sampling method for more contact. Our main data collection process is through site visits, surveys, and in-depth interviews. In total, we conducted 36 interviews, among them 26 with farms and 10 with institutions. The 26 farms can be classified according to many indicators. For example, by farm size, there will be large scale, small, and by ownership, there are state-owned, private-owned. By the products, there are diverse products farms, monoculture farms, and by farming methods, there will be certified organic farms, permaculture farms, biodynamic farms, and so on. And those types of farms actually overlapped a lot. So to clearly divide those farms into categories, we use two indicators of ownership and farm size. And it's worth noting that in terms of the ownership, the private-owned farms can actually be subdivided into owned by new farmers and owned by original farmers because these two farms differs from each other a lot. And in terms of the farm size, we actually found no middle-scale farms that range from 500 mu to 1,000 mu. There may be some interesting reasons behind. For example, there are some marketing barriers for the middle-scale farms to survive, or the land issues. So in total, we have five categories of farms: one state-owned company, 6 large private farms, 4 farmers' professional cooperatives, 13 small farms by new farmers, and 2 small farms by original farmers. And the majority of the ecological agriculture is undertaken by the group of new farmers. And on this map is the distribution of the interviewed farms of our study. The larger the green point means that the more farms visited in this area. And what are the features of those five categories of farms, especially concerning their strong and weak ecological modernization feature? Here we use some cartoon picture to show the first impression of those farms to us. Like the state-owned farm is very formal, and they are actually a honey trader rather than farmer, because the way they operate is to contract with farmers to purchase the honey from them. But many people, especially the government, view the state-owned company as the farm leader because they can get together all those scattered small-scale farmers, uniform and standardize their products and achieve the competitive force. But when we ask it why those small farmers want to contract with them, they said that there is not much competitors in the honey industry. So if the small bee farmers want to contract with the large company, like this company is the only choice of them. The other way that the state-owned company participates in the ecological farming is by conveying the requirements of ecological honey to bee farmers. It seems like that they are promoting ecological agriculture farming styles to the farmers, but actually they maintain the product of regular honey. So on the ground, they will purchase those regular honeys rather than limited to the ecological honey. And the other paradoxical feature of the state-owned company is that although they are very active in joining the honey industry and they want to make rules and ecological standards, but this is not because they concern on the social facts or on the environment, because they concern on the exploitation. So in total, this category of state-owned farms exhibits very weak features in all dimensions. And the second 6 large private farms, they are actually all operated by the male new farmers. Because they are new farmers to agriculture, they don't have farming skills and experiences before, so they are eager for ecological farming knowledge. They actually learn those farming knowledge by getting organic certified. One farmer told us that organic certification is not only about certification, it's a way to learn how to farm organically. And through our interviews with them, those farms view farming both as a way of living, as they are telling us that how they feel their life changed, improved after they entering the ecological farming, and they also view farming as the businesses. The emphasis is that they will keep the featured products and they will to be the representative of the farms, and they will use the conventional market channels to achieve the sales. Like shown in this picture, this is a large scalp of egg, a green egg, indicates that the farm is specialized in producing egg. And this picture shows that the products are very well packaged to suit into the supermarket. And those large private farms are always use the top-down management model, like businesses type. They will be the CEO of the farm, and other staffs and farm workers will be at the lower level. And because of this level, they will have distance from the peasant, but they will build close relations with the government because the government can facilitate the operating of the farms. So in total, these categories, although they have very strong magnificence on the ecological dimension, they are relatively weak on the other dimensions. And the third is farm cooperatives. The four of them all want to achieve the price premium through ecological farming. This is often related to the poverty reduction program that's largely conducted in China. But the monetary pursuit is also leads to their loose attitudes to organic standards. As one farmer told us, people will, for example, secretly spread fertilizers to their crops at midnight, or sometimes others can't notice, so their yields will increase. And the other features of this category is that peasants are to different extent included in the farmers' professional cooperatives. I will use a small imitation to show that. There are the first comers to, in a village, there will be the first comers to ecological agriculture. They are usually triggered by external reasons and the supporters. But when they come to the ecological agriculture, they will successfully turning to rich people. So it will influence the late adopters to enter the ecological farming. However, the first comers and the late adopters are not same included when they establish the professional cooperatives. The first comers will easily become the consuls who has the speaking power, while the late adopters usually just be the regular members who do not access to the collective rights. So this is very like the first comers will be the leading role in the professional cooperatives. In total, this category of farms shows weak features on the ecological and economic dimension, but they are relatively strong on the political and social cultural dimension. The fourth category of small farmers by new farmers, we have 13 samples, and they are all driven by non-economic motivations to do organic farming, which Ning will explain to us later. And they are so committed to ecological farming as they are trying very hard to find the right appropriate way to do farming correctly on their farms. And they will do so not by getting organic certification, but to hire the peasants as the technical advisors. And they will also hire the peasants as the farm workers. And for the marketing channel, they will diversify their marketing channels by combining alternative food networks and agro-tourism. For example, this is a very well decorated farm to attract tourism. And in this picture, those plates there shows the name of the like small plot owner. So if you want to be a like farmland owner, you can just sign with the farm to be the members of member consumers of the farm. So it is another way to attract consumers. For this category of farms, they are quite strong on the ecological and economic dimension, but relatively weak on the other dimensions. And for the last categories of the small farmers by original farmers, we only have 2 samples. And through our interviews with them, their understandings to organic agriculture are actually inspired by the traditional farming background. When we asked it how they acquire the farming knowledge, they said that we certainly know. If you grew up in the rural family and watched how people farm, you will know. So in their mind, the organic farming is actually equal to the non-chemical farming. And we found that their choices of doing organic agriculture is more like the catering to the existing conditions. For example, they think the non-chemical farming is a way to save money. And they found that the quality products nowadays are more welcomed by citizens. But the other feature is that they are quite vulnerable in finding the markets. The partly reason is that they lack the ability and confidence to effectively communicate to consumers and to persuade them to buy their products. So this will lead to their dependence on external supporters. For example, their other farmer friends or the government department who will fund them their marketing channels. For this category, they are quite strong on the ecological dimension, but because they are subject to the market and the policy, they are quite weak in other dimensions. So in total, the 5 categories of farms exhibit different features in terms of the weak and strong sustainability on the 4 dimensions. In general, the state-owned farms is weak in all dimensions, and farms operated by the new farmers are strong on the ecological dimension. Compare the farms operated by the original farmers will be weak on the economic dimension, but strong on the political and social cultural dimension. For the more policy analysis and understanding of the new farmers, Ning will give us the second half of the.
In order to understand the drivers on the policy side of ecological modernization in China, first I will take you to trace down the history and the political economy context of how the concept of modernization, of sustainable development came into China. First, the concept of modernization was actually brought to the public by Premier Zhou Enlai in 1964, that he put this government discourse of foreign modernizations, that is modernization in agriculture, in industry, national defense, and technologies. But before this came into effect, China experienced the Cultural Revolution, which some of you might be familiar with. That was a great political turbulence. So none of these policies really were implemented. But later on set of the political leadership from Mao to Deng Xiaoping, and during the time of economic reform in 1978, and Deng reiterated the discourses of modernizations and also prioritized the modernization of technology over the other 3 dimensions. And in order to justify the legitimacy of the new government depart from the old leadership, there were some rhetorics that to smash superstition, to master science. It's science an ideological shift from the cult of personality during Mao's time to cultivate citizens as rational, as scientific citizens. And it was from there we see the rise of science and technology during the government leaders. So following the Deng's leadership, within 10 years, there's been very radical shifts within the government. So the political leaders used to be dominated by people with backgrounds in politics, but that changed to mostly people with backgrounds in engineering or in science, and the dominance of scientists and engineers in the political leadership, especially at highest level, continue to today. These are the three latest government leaders in China, and all of them had backgrounds in engineering before. And there was also from Jiang Zemin, the person on the left, from him that put forward the concept of sustainable development, and that was in 1996, right after the Earth Summit in Rio. And most of the principles are consistent with the Earth Summit. And this concept was again prioritized by the following succeeding government leaders like Hu Jintao, which translated into ecological civilization that advocates for China's society to transform from the energy-based, energy-intensive industrial civilization towards energy-saving, eco-friendly, ecological civilization. And again, that concept was adopted by Xi Jinping into his China dream. So there has been, so among these scientific backgrounds, political leaders in China, that has been shown a strong ambition to transform China's economy and to reach a greener development, and this can be reflected by some of the government policies and goals. One is China commits to reduce 48% of the carbon intensity by 2020, but on the other hand, we can still see this technocentric governance logic in how to achieve those sustainable goals is to advance technology to replace the infrastructure. So the first graphic shows that China is #1 investor in renewable energies, and also the second graph shows that China tries to subsidize and put more support to electric vehicles. And later we are going to see the policies for sustainable development in agriculture. We can still see there's a path dependency of the governing logic. And here I will draw on three major policies. That is the National Plan for Sustainable Agriculture, National Plan for Agricultural Modernization. And these policies basically give a blueprint of China's future agricultural development in the next 15 years. And we'll analyze again, we use the 4 dimensions of ecological modernization which Dan Shu has introduced. The first, look at the economic dimension. The policy still put strong emphasis on productivity and scale that tries to achieve at least 50 million hectares of consolidated high-yield drought-resistant crop fields by 2020, and to subsidize farms whose scales are especially larger than the average sizes to encourage farms to scale up. And the second is the ecological dimension. The government still prefers to use the technology-based methods. Like there are 3 areas. The first is infrastructure. And the way to promote more modern, sustainable agriculture is through means of replacing or enhancing the irrigation system, and to further the mechanization of farming. And second is to replace the conventional fertilizers with organic fertilizers, although most of those in China will be produced by commercial manufacturers. The third is to further the research in biotechnology. And you can see that in 2 pictures below, these are the devices the government gives free to ecological farmers, including sticky traps and pest killing lamps. And in contrast to the measures that are based on technological advancement, the attention to the political and social sides are really little. And one relevant policy I could find was to train professional new farmers in China to become the new farming majority. And if farmers are registered and certified as a professional new farmer, they can enjoy better access to credit markets, can enjoy better social welfare. But in order to qualify, you have to have larger scales, higher education, higher incomes than the average. So it's a bit controversial in a way that it downplays the role of the original small-scale farmers who still have the around 20 to 100 million population in China, and only stimulates the ecological modernization of larger scale farmers. And that was the national level policy, and we also talked to the government officials in Nanjing and to look at the policies in regional level. And there are 5 dimensions. First is organic certification. So that is to subsidize the farms who apply and pass the organic certification. But these policies are met with criticism, saying that the China standards are now very stringent for farmers to meet, and the certification subsidy is also subject to the wavering government policy. So some farmers told us between 2014 and 2016 there were no subsidy, that the subsidy for certification was suspended, but later on it was reenacted because of a change of leadership. And the second factor is the subsidy for organic fertilizer, and those also met with criticism. Some farmers say that they don't use the organic fertilizers provided by the government because they believe the standards are not high enough. And they said that the government actually has a bidding system to decide which are fertilizer manufacturer to subsidize, and those who get lowest prices will get subsidies. So it's kind of like lower the price, lower the quality. The third is an infrastructure support, that government will subsidize the building of greenhouse, of irrigation system on farms, but only farms over a certain scale, like around 77.5 hectares, will gain appropriate attention from government and qualify for those projects. And the fourth dimension is public procurement, and that's interesting because a lot of the government departments actually have been procuring organic foods and for the canteens or employees during festivals, but that was very heavily impacted by an anti-corruption campaign that she put forward in 2013, and has resulted in some financial problems of organic farms. The last point is occasionally government will support organic farmers by advertising products in the state media or in public transportation, like there were ads on the subway. So based on the policy analysis on national and regional level, can see that there is a strong trend of path dependency in sustainability governance, that the same technocentric logic was transferred from the sustainable governance in energy and transportation sectors into the food sector, and largely downplayed the role and the potential of converting the regional farmers and to reenact their traditional knowledge to achieve a more sustainable future. And one professor we communicate with in Nanjing actually told us a story that he has close ties with the government and predicts next year the government will publish strong support for organic agriculture, and let that to guide food safety in China, and will fundamentally transform food systems. But only those competent large-scale farmers can be part of the game, and the small farmers will question, what about them? And the answer we got was that either they have to scale up or just have to perish. But on the other hand, we thought it's only the picture would be balanced if we also listen to the voices of our practitioners of organic agriculture. And as Danshu has introduced, the numbers show that most of organic organic farmers who interviewed in Nanjing actually are new farmers. And the definition of new farmers here is different from the government's definition of new professional farmers. And these are called new farmers because they're new to farming, they're new to the countryside, grew up in cities, and they have new ideas, they have new resources and new marketing strategies that have gained through all the years being entrepreneurs. So you can see that this is a timeline of where some of the new farmers established their farms and the backgrounds they came from. So it's a very diverse backgrounds, and they have accumulated somewhat large amount of resources and the wealth that contribute to their resilience in organizing those organic farms. And since they were not in the industry before and just came to do organic farming, we think it's interesting to look at why, what were their motives. There was some discussion in the European context as to drawing on the motives of farmers converting to organic production. There are 4 dimensions: technical reasons, financial motives, personal health, or environmental reasons. But there are some nuances we've discovered on the case of Chinese farmers. The first is that some farmers said that the only reason why they do organic farming is because they want to practice their theories they learned either at work or at school. One of the quotes is from, the first quote is from the farmer who actually only spent part-time on the farm. He has a full-time job. The reason why he wants to do that is because he's also a researcher, so he wants to examine the theories. A second quote from a farmer said that he wants to examine permaculture as a sustainable model. And second kind of motive, the most referred motive we heard is on the health side. So many of the farmers have experienced the food scares and food safety scandals in China, and they find they are not unable to trust any food sources. So that's why they enter the sector to grow food for themselves and for their families. And the third factor is actually more interesting, that some farmers, actually most of the farmers mention the word 情怀 to us, as translating in English probably as nostalgia. That is, they said they have strong emotional connections to the rural China, whether it's through the childhood memories or it's through their exposure to media or novels. That we almost see there's a romanticization of the agrarian China inside them, that they want to pass on the wisdom of traditional farming, and they want to resort to the countryside to do farming for like inner peace and for escape from the cities. We think the motives are very interesting, very important to the organic sector in China, because a lot of the farmers actually are not doing very well financially. As you can see in the quote, one farmer jokes with us saying that doing organic agriculture actually turns the rich into the poor. But it is because they have non-monetary motives, and they also have the resources they established over years that allow them to persist in doing organic agriculture. And their identities as new farmers also bring to some new features. The first is that there's a lack of AFNs in Nanjing, so the farmers market just started very recently this year after we left, and there hasn't been really authentic CSAs in Nanjing, but and a lot of these small-scale organic farmers are unable to afford selling their products in the conventional market chains, and but they're able to leverage on the rise of digital economy in China, because more and more young generations are buying food, fresh, including fresh food, online. And you can see the pictures actually show there's an online shop that's embedded in a communication app. So farmers are able to add their consumers as friends and directly communicate with them and share articles, and to sort of like establish relationships that goes beyond material exchange, but to have shared values and principles. And it's a new way of rebuilding trust between producers and consumers. But on the other hand, because of the identity of these new farmers sort of as urban elites, and have not been exposed to rural society before. They have difficulties in trying to starting farms. And some farmers said that when they first came to the rural society, they were perceived as rich intruders. They were deliberately sabotaged by some of the peasants that they hired as farm workers on their farms, and they found it's very hard to communicate and build dialogues with the traditional farmers, let alone trying to convert them into doing organic agriculture. And that brings us to the concluding remarks.
We have seen the broad practices of ecological agriculture actually reflect a spectrum ranging from the strong ecological modernization that more links to the local ecology and community, to the weak ecological modernization that tend to be technology and science driven. So our study contributes to the understanding that what versions of ecological modernization that those ecological agriculture has implemented in China. So the ecological agriculture in Nanjing is mainly constituted by state-owned farms, large-scale farms, farmers cooperatives, small farms by new farmers, and small farms by original farmers. Among them, the state-owned company is weak in promoting ecological agriculture, achieving the shared benefits and enhancing smallholders' autonomy. But farmers operated by new farmers are quite strong in empowering themselves, but quite weak in getting in sustain themselves economically. Instead, the farms operated by new farmers are strong in secure the market and leading to a very strict organic farming method, but they are weak in concern of the inclusion and participation of small farmers. And these categories of farms actually indicate the ecological pathways of agriculture in China. And I think future research could look more on the reasons of why these categories are formed like this, why is there strong and weak features exhibit like this, because through understanding those underlying reasons, we can know how to improve China's way to the strong ecological modernization in future.
And there's some continuation of the conclusion. The first is that on the governance side, we've seen the path dependency and of technocratic governance for sustainable development, and has permeated into the food policies that privilege the large-scale technology-driven methods and solutions, but overlook the potential of converting and rejuvenating the rural China and relying on the original farmers. The second conclusion is that actually the cultural gap and the widening urban-rural differences undermine the likelihood of the new organic farmers, these urban elites, to sort of communicate and transfer the knowledge and the principles into rural peasant communities. And this third conclusion is that the impasse between the government's vision of ecological agriculture actually clashes with the small-scale organic farmers' practices, but that actually sort of stimulated more market innovation for small-scale farmers because they have no other means but to innovate and to find new ways such as online platforms to sell their products. And the future directions, there's some interesting questions we can discuss. The first is which groups of farmers will become the majority in China's ecological agriculture in the future, because there have been different visions from the governments. Could be the new professional farmers the government is trying to train, or it could be the large-scale corporate-led farmers, or it could be actually collaborative efforts made by the new farmers and the original farmers. The second future research is to look at how new farmers in China are reinventing the alternative networks to suit China's rising digital economy. And that is all. Thank you.